Samantha found out about her husband having another woman by accident when she went to the dry cleaners to pick up his suit and was given a huge red dress along with the suit. She said it was a mistake, but the girl with the stern glasses poked her finger into the ledger. That's right, a blue wool suit, one piece, a silk dress with flowers, one piece. In the movies, the mistresses are always young and slim. Samantha's rival was the same age as her and wore clothes 2 sizes larger than Samantha herself, who after 50 began to gain weight, but not critically. At least the salesgirls did not offer her to go to the big box store. This one could use some. "Thomas, what is this?" she asked her husband quietly in the evening, biting the inside of her cheek to keep from screaming. Somehow, she thought her husband would deny it, tell a story about a third aunt or something like that. But her husband sank heavily into the armchair, covered his face with his hands, and said in a muffled voice, "I love her." It turned out he'd been living 2 houses down for a year. And it also turned out that Samantha knew her rival very well. It was Megan's hairdresser, who she had somehow made an appointment with while her hairdresser was on vacation. She didn't like the haircut, it was too short, and she never went back. How she and Thomas had managed to get together was a mystery, and she didn't ask, for fear she'd scream. Screaming was not her style. Samantha had always prided herself on her poise. They divorced quietly, without scolding or drama. Thomas, happy with such a successful arrangement, left her the apartment, but took the cottage and the car. His Megan turned out to be an avid gardener and had already planned what varieties of tomatoes and radishes will grow there. Samantha herself had never liked the dacha, so she wasn't particularly upset. She didn't drive a car, so she didn't feel this loss either. But it was hard without her husband, whom, as she thought, she had never really loved. Either she had gotten used to him, or she was not at the right age to be alone. Her daughter wanted to come, but Samantha talked her out of it. They had never been very close anyway. She would only teach her about life as usual. "Mom, you have to work, you can't stay at home anymore. Mom, look at the program for the elderly, you can study and then get a job. Mom, what's that coat you're wearing, did you steal it from the checkroom attendant at the museum?" No, Samantha didn't need that right now. But she had to admit, her daughter was right, and she needed to work. But Thomas didn't want Samantha to work. He liked to have hot meals and sterile cleanliness at home. His mother was a doctor and had taught him cleanliness from childhood. And Samantha had a lot to do with her daughter: ballet, French, tutors. And why only fiddled, it is unclear. Now works as a dancer, dances half naked on stage. If Samantha had known, did not spend so much effort and money. When Samantha went to the first interview, she was sure that she would be hired. When she went for her 15th, she knew she'd be turned down. Some kind woman in line recommended that she go to a good office. By then Samantha was almost out of money, and it was embarrassing to ask her daughter. She was greeted in the office by a surly young woman who also apparently had to dress in an oversized store. She absent-mindedly looked over Samantha's paperwork and asked, "So you haven't worked anywhere since you were 23? Is that against the law?" Samantha was angry. The girl snorted. "And you're an architect by training. Do you know that in 30 years this field has changed a bit? What are you implying, that I'm out of touch with life? By the way, I've mastered the smartphone faster than my daughter, she still can't process photos." The girl looked at her more closely. "You have a daughter?" "Of course I do. How old is she?" "She'll be 30 soon. But what's she got to do with it? I need a job, not her. Although, you should know what she does, shame on you. I spent my whole life on her, I haven't worked for 30 years, and she..." The girl closed the folder and said, "Here it is. My name is Elizabeth. And I'm hiring you. I need someone to help me communicate with my mom." Samantha stared at her in surprise. "What does that have to do with me?" "Because you look just like my mom. The psychologist told me that I won't solve my problems until I learn to communicate with my mother properly." "How do you do that?" "No matter what I say, she's never happy. So I was wondering if you could answer to her for me. You know, with the right words. She'll stop scolding me and I'll stop eating nonstop. How about that? Yeah, the suggestion was so ridiculous that Samantha laughed. She stood up, picked up her papers and said, I think I'm beginning to understand your mother. I've never heard such nonsense in my life. Samantha was on her way to the door, but she turned around. The girl's face was wrinkled and she was sniffing her nose childishly. Her daughter had cried like that when she was a baby. Samantha stopped. Okay, she said. I'll tell everyone I'm a psychologist. I'll tell them I took a refresher course. Things didn't go well at first. Elizabeth would call her, read her mother's messages, ask her what to say. Samantha would dictate, and Elizabeth would argue. However, tired of arguing with Samantha, Elizabeth sometimes gave up and answered with something average, and the result was not long in coming. Her mother did not swear so much anymore, and Elizabeth did not eat so much. On Saturdays Elizabeth had phone calls with her mom, and on those days Samantha would come to her apartment. Elizabeth would put the conversation on speakerphone and Samantha would write her answers on a piece of paper. Elizabeth's relationship with her mother had really improved, although even Samantha recognized that Elizabeth's mother was overreacting. Yes, the girl was overweight. But is that a reason to scold her? The poor girl was already running to the bathroom after every meal, so what was the big deal? Where is your father? Samantha asked, thinking that maybe he had a mistress too, and that's why Elizabeth's mother was so angry. He died years ago when I was a little girl, Elizabeth answered. I was so angry with him as a child. Well, that he left us. I didn't realize then that death can't be stopped. We had no money and nothing to eat. Sometimes I think that's why I eat so much, I can't stop. I felt sorry for that girl. Even though Samantha had already found a normal job in a neighboring office, she still helped her. After the Saturday calls, they drank tea and talked. At first it was nothing, but then Elizabeth began to share her household chores with her, and Samantha told her about her husband and his mistress, and about her daughter, who worked as a dancer. Can I tell my mother about it? Elizabeth laughed. She doesn't like my work. Amazingly, Samantha even told Elizabeth about her sister. We've always been so friendly, we've never had a fight in our lives. And then I fell in love. His name was Robert, tall, handsome, he was a mechanic. But I was proud and told him he was no match for me. Emma, of course, knew I liked him. And she said I was stupid. But the truth is, I was a professor's daughter, well-bred, well-educated. And what was he? I was stupid, of course. I went to my grandmother's for the summer, and when I came back, these two were already dating. So I told my sister she'd ruin her life and left for good. What do you mean? For good? Elizabeth didn't understand. Literally. I saw her 3 times at my father's funeral, at my mother's funeral, and at the notary's office when the will was drawn up. They flew to New Jersey, and I married Thomas. And you're still not communicating? Samantha swallowed the lump that prevented her from breathing and said. She died 2 years ago. And you didn't even go to the funeral? I didn't, Samantha confirmed. Elizabeth shook her head. Yes. I think you need a psychologist more than I do. You know what? You should go to her grave. Her sister. And talk to her like she's alive. I did that, I talked to my dad. And it made me feel better. It really helps. Samantha didn't take the advice seriously at first. But for some reason, she couldn't let it go. She remembered when Robert had called, how her lips had gone numb and she hadn't been able to utter a word, whether from the horror and impossibility of believing that her sister was gone or because his voice still had power over her, the sound of it making her heart skip a beat. She said nothing to Thomas and did not go to the funeral. She didn't want to see her sister dead, couldn't face Robert without giving herself away. She knew the address, her sister had written letters to them over the years, enclosing pictures of herself and the children. Samantha cropped off the generic photos of Robert, hiding them in a separate folder. It was a good thing neither her daughter nor Thomas had found that folder. What would have happened if she had died just as suddenly? And one of them, going through her things, had found those mutilated cards? After tossing and turning in bed until 3 in the morning, Samantha got up and bought a ticket to New Jersey. Quickly, before she changed her mind. Elizabeth approved of her decision and said she could probably manage without Samantha's help now. Maybe I'll even go to visit her, Elizabeth said uncertainly. On the train Samantha met a lovely young couple. They were going on a wedding trip. A strange decision to take a wedding trip on a train, but everyone has their quirks. But they told her what hotel to stay at in New Jersey, and where to find out the burial place. The girl was from there, up to 15 years lived there. In the hotel, however, Samantha did not like it very much. The rooms were small and stuffy, the windows overlooked the road. But she wouldn't be here long. After putting her suitcase down and washing up, Samantha called the cemetery office. It felt strange to say her sister's name, her mouth felt bitter and her eyes felt like they were burning with hot air. Samantha rehearsed what she would say to her sister, that she forgave her and held no more grudges, that she regretted the years she had ignored her letters, though she had read them all carefully and even reread them, putting them in stacks. The words didn't fit well, not wanting to come out of her mouth. Samantha sighed, changed into a strict dress. She was going to the cemetery, after all, noted that it hung on her, whether from worrying or looking at Elizabeth. Samantha had eaten much less, and was even pleased with her reflection in the mirror. She decided to buy flowers near the cemetery, for they would probably sell them there. She left the room with only her purse, walked down the hall, down the stairs. She ran into a man in a plaid suit at the door, and he let her through, holding the heavy door open for her. "Samantha?" His voice made her heart skip a beat. If it hadn't been for the pictures his sister had sent over the years, Samantha wouldn't have recognized him. Robert had changed a lot since the last time they'd seen each other. And so had she. But he recognized her, even though Samantha hadn't sent any pictures of herself. She stopped, not knowing what to do next. He stepped forward and pulled her tightly against his chest. He smelled of lemon and seawater. "How are you doing, Samantha? Why didn't you call?" She stood like a statue, didn't raise her arms for a return hug, couldn't even squeeze out a smile. Samantha thought the feeling had withered and subsided over the years, but now it was rising up inside her, braiding its branches, blossoming into outlandish flowers that smelled of lemon and seawater. "I wanted to go to my sister's grave," she squeezed out with difficulty, realizing that further silence would be too strange. "I didn't want to bother anyone, so I decided to stay at a hotel." Robert laughed. "So this is my hotel. I didn't want to go today, but the pipe in the basement burst, so I decided to check it out myself." "Samantha, it's so good to see you. You haven't changed at all. You know what? I'll have the girls make you some coffee, creamy, just the way you like it. You still like it creamy, right? I'll do a quick errand, take you to the cemetery. And then back to our place." "No, no, 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 no. The kids are coming over tonight. You haven't seen them, have you? I'll have your things moved to our place. I was going to call you, but I was afraid you wouldn't answer." He waved his hands and stopped talking. And Samantha suddenly realized that all her fears and resentments all these years were only in her head. She felt an acute longing for a time that could never be reclaimed, for a sister she had not known for most of her life because of her own stupidity. And she said, "Okay. Let's do as you say." At the cemetery, Robert delicately stepped aside. Samantha couldn't say anything to her sister. But she was able to look at a picture of her as an adult, with kind eyes like her mother's. And promise that she would come back here again. The house turned out to be cozy, a little cluttered, but still nice. It felt like it was missing a woman's hand, and could use a good cleaning. "Don't any of your children want to live with you?" she asked Robert, trying to keep her voice light-hearted. "No," he sighed. My daughter-in-law doesn't like private homes and my daughters have a long commute to work. But they take turns visiting me. Thank you for your concern, it's so nice. I realize you've hated me all these years, thought I was no match for your sister. But I swear I've been a good husband and I've never hurt her. To be honest, when I was young, I dreamed of marrying you. Why are you looking at me like that? You were so beautiful. You still are. Samantha stood there puzzled. What is he talking about? Are you sick? Robert was frightened. Sit here, I'll get you some water. He rushed into the kitchen. Samantha sank into a chair and closed her eyes. It wasn't as bad as she thought. She had been afraid that both her sister and Robert knew about her unrequited love, felt sorry for her, and maybe even laughed at her. But it turns out they both thought Samantha just didn't like him. Just then something touched her feet. She startled, opened her eyes. There was a shaggy dog curled up at her feet. It grunted softly, trying to rest its head on her shoes. Abby? Wondered Robert. He stood like that in the doorway with a glass of water, mouth open. Is that your dog? It was a stupid question, Samantha realized, clearly theirs. It wasn't like a stranger had come in off the street. Since Emma died, she won't let anyone near her, he said quietly. It was her dog. She doesn't recognize me or the children, she even bit me recently. He showed her his hand, though there were no bite marks. But Samantha understood what he was saying. She leaned over and gently stroked the dog. At that moment, the phone rang. She cringed, what bad timing. She wanted to reset it, but saw that it was Elizabeth. Poor girl, she must have had another fight with her mom. Hello? Hello. It's Elizabeth. How are you? I'm sorry to call, but I think I'm making progress. After we talked, I thought, if you've been able to come after all these years, why can't I just visit my mom? Especially since sooner or later she's going to make me go anyway. So I bought a cake and I went. And I only ate one piece. She told me again that I was fat, that no one would ever want me like that, and when I showed her Taylor's picture, she said I could see in his eyes that he was a scoundrel. But I hung in there and I didn't disagree with her. And I didn't cry. But then, at night, I snapped. I went to the kitchen, got the cake, sat on the floor and started eating it with a spoon, right out of the box. Eating it and crying. She came in, saw it, took a spoon and sat down next to me. We sat there in silence, eating cake, tears smearing down our cheeks. And then she suddenly said, I was so afraid it would be a boy. He used to beat me, your father. He never left a mark, I couldn't even complain to anyone. I was afraid my son would be like him. But then you were born. And I was even more afraid, I realized that you'd grow up to be just like me. And you'd be beaten too, and you'd have to give birth too. I wanted you to have a different life. Do you understand? And I told her that when my ex called me fat, I slapped him and kicked him out of the house. And my mom and I laughed, can you believe it? And then she said, you're not fat, you're so beautiful, my daughter. Then I cried. And she cried. We were covered in cake and tears, but so happy. I threw that cake away, I didn't want to eat it anymore. And I didn't want to fight with her anymore. I'm sorry, I keep talking and talking, how are you? Samantha looked at the framed picture of her sister, at the dog nestled at her feet. She didn't look at Robert, but she could feel his back. I'm doing fine, she said. I think everything is going to be okay now. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, subscribe to my channel, put likes and press the bell. A lot of new interesting romantic stories are waiting for you ahead.